Today on Substance Stories, we'll be talking about wearable tech, the do's and don'ts, and how to live a happy life with technology. So I want to talk about wearable tech because this is this great piece of technology that's come along in the past decade and has really changed us. You can see I've got my nondescript watch. I won't mention Apple because they haven't paid. Oh no! Um, and I think it's really interesting, right? Because this really falls into this concept called the Hawthorne Effect, which is by observing an activity changes it. So you see this in medicine all the time. Your blood pressure will be higher at the doctor's because you're going to the doctors, you're getting anxious about getting your blood pressure taken, or it happens all the time in society when suddenly you become really aware. If someone says to you, "Oh, geez, you're walking a bit unsteady today," so suddenly you become really aware of how you're walking, and then suddenly you get a bit more unsteady because we're putting up too much attention on what we're walking. And you see it all the time in people with sleep difficulties. Sleep's one of those bugger of a things that the more we think about it, the more anxious we get about it, the worse it gets, right? So by observing something and applying more attention to it, we are actually changing the effect without trying to change it in any conscious manner. And wearable tech is the exact example because it can be this really, really useful tool. This thing will tell me whether I have atrial fibrillation, and then I can go to the hospital and I can, potentially prevent a stroke. But also, it measures my sleep, and people will come to me all the time and say, "Oh, look at my sleep scores. They're not what it should be," or my sleep rating was in the 60s, and last week it was in the 90s, and this must mean I have something. We're putting so much emphasis on the meaning on this watch, where for a million reasons that could be wrong. And we can become obsessional about it. And then in becoming obsessional about it and thinking about it more, that Hawthorne effect kicks in. And the more we are observing and thinking about it, the worse that thing is going to get. So it can be about our sleep, our blood pressure, our food intake. These are all over-observing them can lead to worse outcomes. Likewise, though, not paying attention to this stuff at all is also obviously a disaster. If I come in and I say I'm tired someone comes into me and says I'm tired all the time, and I'm not getting any good sleep, and that's why I'm engaging in this substance. And I'm saying, well, why are you tired all the time? It's because, well, I'm on my phone until like 4 a.m. and then I just, no wonder you're tired all the time. You're not sleeping. So there's got to be some sweet Goldilocks zone between using this technology effectively and not using it at all, right? And that's my hope for people with addiction. Why is this irrelevant to people with addiction? Well, part of addiction is we get stuck in this black and white thinking, right? I can't have one beer, I have to have 20 beers. I can't have, one joint, I have to smoke 50 bongs. I can't use once, I have to use on a 10-day binge. This is how addiction makes us think. This is when we're in an addiction, we get stuck in this black and white thinking. And I think what can happen when we're in recovery is that same black and white thinking can follow us around. So we might get sober and abstinent, but we still think about the world. I need to go to the gym exactly in this way and really give it a crack. I need to make sure I'm eating perfectly. I need to give my 100% to everything. I think you'd be surprised about how healthy it is to give 60 to 70% of your life to everything. So that's what I try and do. I actually monitor myself, and if I'm giving too much of a shit about something, I try to reel it back. Obviously, I want to give the best I can for my work and my family, but also too much in anything, we all need a break. We need to put in healthy boundaries with our work. We need to put in healthy boundaries with our work at home, housework. Life is about healthy boundaries, and as should our relationship with technology. What I see in my life is in my clinical. What I see in my clinical practice is that people that are really into their wearable tech probably are the exact people that need to put it down sometimes, and people that don't have wearable tech and aren't monitoring themselves at all could probably benefit from it. And what I really think about that is this idea of the Hawthorne effect and this idea of this black and white thinking. So I think everything in our life we should look at and say, is this taking up too much of my life? Am I using this as a tool to avoid those uncomfortable feelings, or as AA would call it, being a dry drunk. I'm abstinent, but I'm still not sitting with these uncomfortable thoughts that are driving my addiction. I need to be constantly distracted. I was talking to someone the other day that, had gone from, she was 10 years sober, but she was then a compulsive exerciser and then a compulsive shopper. And now she's on her phone hours and hours a day. And she could very eloquently say, I haven't dealt with the things that were driving my addiction and they're still here. I'm still avoiding spending any time with my thoughts. And this is what I talk about a lot with my patients. I call it my 70% rule, where if I look at my week and I've got more than 70% full, I will cancel things. I will say, look, I will call up a friend that I was going to meet for dinner early in the week, and I'll say, look, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to delay that a couple of weeks because I can't deal with that. I need that time for my thoughts. I need to make sure I'm giving myself space so I can sit with my feelings, so I'm not feeling overwhelmed. So I've got that functional reserve. Let's say if I get in a car accident tomorrow and I need to, bus everywhere and, maybe go to the doctors and get an MRI, my world's not going to collapse. And I think what's wrong with the world is it wants us to operate at 100%. And if we operate at 100%, we have no functional capacity to deal with the slings and arrows of life. We need to make sure we're operating at 70%, and wearable tech is exactly like that. Anything we do, we should be operating at 70%. So if you're reading your sleep scores every day, put the phone down, have a chill, maybe sleep without the Whoop band. If you are not remotely paying attention to your food intake or your sleep intake or your sleep quality, maybe it's time to have a think about it. Maybe the wearable tech could be useful to you. I think technology, like any tool, it really matters how we use it, and it merits us having a think about our relationship with the device and thinking to ourselves, is this a healthy relationship? If it isn't, what can I do to try and reset the relationship to make it more healthy? Thank you so much for listening.